Okay, good evening, everybody, or good morning, wherever you are. We're in the middle of Muktzeh. The last thing we were learning in Muktzeh was besides broken things. Let's leave that and get to some more practical things. Okay, we're discussing that food which is not edible. Okay, like if you have raw potato that nobody eats a raw potato, and it's not Yom Tov where you're allowed to cook it. So then the raw potato is muktzeh because it's not a food. It's not used for anything. Raw fish, raw meat, all these things are uncooked beans, rice, anything that dough, anything that it might be food item if you cook it, but you can't eat it raw. And therefore, when it's raw, it has it in that it's completely muktzeh. Okay? So we're discussing, the end thing we were discussing last time was you have pits, you have peels, you have shells. Bottom line is, if it's an edible shell or peel or pit, then it's not muktzeh. We're discussing many people eat the watermelon pits. They just swallow them. I mean, many people eat them, many people don't. But it's still considered an edible thing. But if it's a pit or a nut peel that's not edible, so then that becomes completely muktzeh. You can't move it for any reason whatsoever. The same thing, bones, animal bones, chicken bones. If it's edible, then it's not muktzeh. If it's not edible, it is muktzeh. Unless if it's a bone that you would give for your dog or cat or whatever. So then because it's also an animal food, so animal foods are also not considered muktzeh and Shabbos. This is basically where we're up to. Now, let's give a few more examples in this din. For instance, it's a big question in halacha about opening cans on Shabbos. I'm not getting into that now. But many opinions say if you have a round can, to take a can open in the can on Shabbos is forbidden. Okay, without getting into that now. Nevertheless, the can is not muktzeh. Why isn't the can muktzeh?
Rabbi, can you raise the volume a little bit?
I can't. Unless if somebody will tell me how to do it.
Actually, no, he needs to raise his own volume.
You have to raise your own volume. You see, you have to raise yourself higher. I can't raise you higher. You got to raise yourself higher. I have to raise myself higher. Anyway, so even though a can cannot be opened on Shabbos, let's say, nevertheless, the can is not muktzeh because it has edible food in it. If it has food that needs to be cooked or whatever, that's not edible, like raw popcorn in a can, so then it's not edible because you have to pop it. But any food which is edible in the can, even though you might not be allowed to open the can on Shabbos, nevertheless, the can is not muktzeh. Why? Because the can is secondary to the food anyway. The food is edible. The can is secondary to the food. So therefore, even though you might not be allowed to open the can to eat the food, but the can is not muktzeh because
Sorry, I fixed it. The problem was on my side. I fixed it.
You see, it takes somebody from Wisconsin to tell you that. Okay, food, frozen food again. What we learned is if it's edible, if as is, it's not muktzeh. If it's not edible, it is muktzeh. Okay, now, next thing over here has to do with medications. Certain medications, I'm going to give an introduction. What's the question with medication, with medicine, about taking medicine on Shabbos? It's not so easy, simple halachically, to take medicine on Shabbos. Sometimes you're allowed to, sometimes you're not allowed to. So obviously, anytime it's a life-endangering situation, a person has a heart condition, thyroid condition, blood pressure, whatever it may be, there's no question they're allowed to take the medication on Shabbos. But there is a rabbinic decree against taking medication on Shabbos. Why is that? Because years ago, in the time of the Gemara, people, how did they make medicine? You didn't go to a pharmacy and buy medicine. They would take herbs, which grew from the ground, and they would grind it up, and they would mix the herbs together, and that would make medicine. Okay, that's how medication is made. Now it's homeopathic, is in a certain way very similar to that too. The bottom line is, Chazal said, because it's biblically forbidden to grind things that grow from the ground. So therefore, it's a big issue. Chazal said you can't take medication on Shabbos because you might come to grind herbs, which is biblically forbidden. So again, if it's the situation where, it's a life-endangering situation, so to speak, then there's no question, obviously, that you would be allowed to take medicine on Shabbos. Now, what happens if somebody is on a regimen of 10 days antibiotics? So then the din is, because they started, they could continue taking it. Any medication that the doctor says you need to take, you're allowed to take. Now, bottom line is, if it's a medication that you're not allowed to take on Shabbos or use on Shabbos, then it's Muktzeh. If it's a medication you are allowed to take on Shabbos, then it's not Muktzeh. So for instance, again, if somebody had a prescription, antibiotics, then you can finish the prescription. But certain medications are, let's say, it's creams, okay? Or you have, let's say, chapstick, okay, which is similar to lipstick. Now, you're not allowed to use chapstick on Shabbos, or lipstick for that matter, but lipstick is two reasons why you're not allowed to use lipstick on Shabbos. One reason is because you're coloring, but there's another reason what's called mamachik, you're smoothing when it's a bar, like a bar of soap, or stick deodorant we were discussing a while back, anything that you have to rub, and on a solid thing, and you rub it, so you're scraping it out, and therefore it's forbidden to do on Shabbos. So because you're not allowed to use something like chapstick on Shabbos, so then it's not considered a utensil, it's Muktzeh. Some people question, let's say, you're not allowed to use a lipstick on Shabbos, so is it Kli SheMelachto LeIsser, and therefore you could move it if you need the place, or it's completely Muktzeh? It's questionable in halacha. But bottom line is, any cream, you're not allowed to smear cream on Shabbos. Sometimes you have to call it off, sometimes you could dab a cream, but you're not allowed to smear cream on Shabbos. So therefore, any cream that you're not allowed to use because it's made to smear and you can't smear it, so that would be automatically Muktzeh. The same thing we're discussing a while back with toothpaste. You're not allowed to use toothpaste on Shabbos because, again, you're smoothing out the cream. So then it would be Muktzeh on Shabbos, so you wouldn't be allowed to move it. Now, somebody asked a question about vitamins. The issue with vitamins is as follows. According to the Alter Rebbe, let's go back a second. If you're taking medication as a food, even though it's a food, but you are only taking it for medicinal purposes. For instance, you hate tea. You just don't want, for you, it's not, you don't drink tea. But you have a very bad sore throat. You have a very bad cold. So you want to take tea with lemon, with honey, whatever, in a permissible way. So now then, even though you are drinking the tea medicinally, but it's really still a food. Tea is a cup of tea is a food. It's a drink that people drink. You're taking it for medicinal purposes only. That doesn't change the situation. It's still a food. Things though, or for instance, let's say things that dissolve in water. Alka-Seltzer, I'm not getting into, you can take Alka-Seltzer maybe, but your problem is there's letters, I believe, on the Alka-Seltzer pill that when you put it into water, you're erasing those letters because it disintegrates. That could be another issue. But anything that, let's say, becomes a food, like a powder, that you mix powder into a medicinal powder into a cup of water or juice, and you're drinking it, then it's not a problem because it's a food. The problem is when it comes to tablets, capsules, even chewable would be less of a problem because you're chewing it. It's a candy, basically. It's a food. So even though you're taking it for medicinal purposes, it might be a lot easier. But something that's normally not eaten, it's swallowed, i.e. capsule, pill, tablet, whatever. So If it's something like we said, you have an antibiotic or you're taking heart medication, blood pressure medication, or things like that, then there's no question that you're allowed to take them on Shabbos. Vitamins, so it depends. If you're taking vitamins because the doctor said you must take vitamins for your health, and it's very important, then you would be allowed to take them on Shabbos. But if the doctor says, it's a good idea to take vitamins on Shabbos, get a little stronger, then the Rebbe holds for sure that you shouldn't be taking them on Shabbos. Now, what somebody could do is they could take it before Shabbos, and then Saturday night they could take it after Shabbos. They don't have to take it during, the 24 hours of Shabbos. Even when you need to take medication, let's say you need to take pills 3 times a day. If possible, if you could take the medication 3 times on Friday, when the Fridays are longer, it's much easier to do. You could take the medication 3 times on Friday, and then you won't have to take it Friday night. Or if somebody has to take it 3 times a day on Shabbos, you could take 1 in the morning, and maybe 2 you could take after Shabbos, if Shabbos ends early. In other words, even when you're allowed to take medication on Shabbos, a person should try to avoid taking it as much as possible on Shabbos. Now, if you have to, you're allowed to, we said. Person's antibiotic, whatever, all those things that you need to take, you're allowed to take. Vitamins and things like that a person could do without for a day, then ideally they shouldn't take it on Shabbos. But again, therefore, it's like this, coming back to Muktzeh. If it's allowed to be taken on Shabbos, then it's not Muktzeh. If it's something you're not allowed to take on Shabbos, then it is Muktzeh. So it's not Kabbalah. It's just if it's a cream that you can't use on Shabbos. Now, sometimes creams could be dabbed on, but that's, again, you have to ask yourself exactly how to do it without cheating, But again, creams that are usable on Shabbos are not Muktzeh. Something like lipstick, chapstick, or all those types of things that you're not allowed to use on Shabbos, so then they're completely Muktzeh. Now, what happens, let's say Band-Aids or, Band-Aids, all those types of things are not Muktzeh because oil can be smeared on dry hands. The question was asked. It could be smeared on dry hand. If it's not a cream, it's a liquid. Okay? I'll give you an example. Even some hand soaps, okay? You have the soaps that you wash dishes with. That is very liquidy. Then you have a lot of the hand soaps that come out either in a foam or they come out much more creamy, than the dish soap that you use to wash dishes. So that creamy soap, you're not allowed to use on Shabbos because, again, you're smearing the cream. So again, if you're not allowed to use it, then it's Muktzeh. If it's very watery, and we hold you could use liquid soap on Shabbos, others hold you can't, but we hold you could use liquid soap on Shabbos. So again, if it's a soap that's liquidy, that you could use it, or you have thicker, creamy soap that you diluted before Shabbos, and now it's actually mamish liquid, so then it's not Muktzeh. Again, if you can use but salves, creams, Vaseline, all those things, have Muktzeh because you can't use them on Shabbos. Same thing with, again, we discussed this in different dinim. Insect repellents, you're allowed to put out, not if it's an aerosol can, a spray. You're allowed to put on insect repellent on Shabbos because you're not killing it. You're not killing the bug, you're just keeping it away. But you can't kill a bug with pesticides or roach killers or raid, any of those types of things, because you're not allowed to kill a bug on Shabbos. So therefore, raid is completely muktzeh on Shabbos. You can't use it. You can't move it for any reason whatsoever because it's not a keli. It's not usable. If it's not usable, then you can't. If it's repellent, then you could. The same thing with cosmetics. Cosmetics that you're allowed to use on Shabbos are not muktzeh. Cosmetics that you're not allowed to use on Shabbos, like we said, lipstick or any creams or anything that colors the body, whether eye color or, all these nail polish and all that stuff. So then, because you're not allowed to do it on Shabbos, it is completely muktzeh. and that's it. So you can't move them on Shabbos. Okay, another similar category over here is food that's forbidden to eat because it's forbidden to eat it. I'll give you an example. Produce, and this, by the way, in America, it's becoming a big problem. They're bringing in a lot of fruits and vegetables from Israel. Used to be a one-time Jaffa oranges. Now they bring in figs and dates, and they bring in a lot of fruits from Israel. So unless it has on the container a very good hechsher of a very reliable kashrus organization, that because they have issues like this, it could be, especially this year, it's the year after Shemitah, it could be maybe the fruits were grown during the sabbatical year, so then you're not allowed to eat it. It could be that they didn't separate the tithings that they have to separate. In Eretz Yisrael, you have to separate Truma and Meiser, and you have to separate Meiser Sheni. There's a lot of tithing that needs to be done in Israel. There's a whole procedure how they do it in Israel and how they do it here. So those fruits and vegetables that come from Israel, number one, because it might be a sabbatical year, so then you're not allowed to eat the fruits. If you're not allowed to eat the fruits because they're forbidden, not because they're not edible. Before we were learning if the fruits are edible, it's not muktzeh. If they're not edible, it is muktzeh. But sometimes you have a scenario where the fruit is edible, but you're not allowed to eat it because it's forbidden to eat. So any fruit produce from Eretz Yisrael, therefore, would be completely muktzeh for Shabbos.
Why do you have it in your house?
Why do they have it in the house? They bought it by mistake. I mean, whatever, I'm not, whatever the reason is. Or they went to somebody else who's not that careful. I'll give you another example. Mixtures of meat and milk together. Now, meat and milk, not only are you not allowed to eat, you're not allowed to benefit from it. So therefore, certain things, that you're not allowed to eat, but you could benefit from it. So it's not necessarily muktzeh because you can use them on Shabbos for permissible use. But stuff that's forbidden not only to eat, but also forbidden to have hana, pleasure from, such as meat and milk, chametz on Pesach, other foods that are forbidden to benefit from, arla, a mixture of wheat and grapes, sometimes wine that a non-Jew touched that was an open bottle, sometimes it's forbidden to benefit from it. So again, any food which is halachically forbidden to eat, even though it's edible and it's a food, it's muktzeh on Shabbos. The reason why I don't want to get, OUD is not acceptable because it's not Chol Yisrael. For those people that keep Chol Yisrael, then it's not. That's the only thing with it. Now, let me tell you something which is more practical in America. Everybody knows when you make a dough, a certain size, you have to separate what's called challah. Okay? In biblical times, challah was in biblical mitzvah. You made a brach on it. You have to take the piece of dough that you separate for challah, you have to give it to the Kohen. It belonged to the Kohen. Okay? In Eretz Yisrael today, it's still a biblical mitzvah. Outside of Eretz Yisrael today, it's only rabbinic challah, not biblical challah. In Eretz Yisrael, there's a biblical mitzvah of separating, of not eating, of separating challah. Outside of Eretz Yisrael today, it's only rabbinic. It's a rabbinic obligation. Now, therefore, you have the following scenario, so to speak. What happens, and this happens a lot, a woman or kids, or a man, whatever, it doesn't matter, bake challah. Okay, you bake 5 pounds of flour, you bake a bunch of challahs, they're already baked. Now, normally, everybody knows, while the dough is still dough, so you separate challah to and make the bracha, and then the rest of the dough is fine. What happens if a woman, I'm using the word woman because they're usually the ones baking challah. What happens if a woman bake challah, and she forgot to separate. She forgot to separate the challah. So what's the halacha, as every good woman knows? You put all the challahs on a tray, you cover them with a towel, and you separate challah even though the challah is already baked. So basically, the problem with that is you're going to ruin a complete challah and it's not going to be whole anymore because you're ripping off a piece and you're going to burn it. Nowadays, we don't give it to the kohen because we don't know who's the kohen. They tell me whatever, we burn the challah. What?
If you have a bunch of little chalitzas, can you just dispose of one?
If you have a bunch of little challahs and you want to separate challah, yeah, you can just take one challah and burn it as challah.
After Shabbos.
Right, after Shabbos, obviously. Now, no, I'm not. This is all before Shabbos yet. This is all before Shabbos.
Okay.
So if a woman forgot to separate challah, you put the challahs together in the tray, you cover it with a towel or something, and then you separate challah with a bracha. What happens if it's Friday night, it's already Shabbos? The woman is bringing the challahs to the table. And then she realizes she forgot to separate challah. Okay? So let's discuss the halacha first in Eretz Yisrael. By separating challah, you are fixing something that's not edible, you are making it edible. That is one of the Lamed Tes Melachos called Makeh B'Patish, putting the finishing touches on something. So if you didn't separate challah, you're not allowed to eat the challah. If you're not allowed to eat the challah, by separating challah, you're making the inedible edible, and that's not allowed to be done on Shabbos. What do you do? That's only in Eretz Yisrael. In Chutz La'aretz, outside of Eretz Yisrael, there's a way out. Because challah of outside of Eretz Yisrael is only rabbinic in nature, the Chachamim said, in this case, what you can do is like this. You can eat the challah on Shabbos and leave over a piece that you're going to burn in challah for after Shabbos. Okay? In Eretz Yisrael, you're not allowed to do that. In Eretz Yisrael, you're not allowed to eat the challah until you separated challah. Outside of Eretz Yisrael, halachically, if you didn't separate challah before, and now you're not allowed to separate challah because it's Shabbos, so Chachamim said you can eat the challah, you can eat the bread. At the end, you have to make sure that you don't finish it. You leave over the size that you normally separate challah, the size of separation of challah, and then you burn it after Shabbos. So this is where the difference is fundamentally between Eretz Yisrael and outside of Eretz Yisrael. Because this challah in Israel is not edible, because you cannot separate challah on Shabbos, because you're fixing the food. Plus, you're not allowed to eat it and then separate it. So this challah that you baked is muktzeh for the entire Shabbos. You not only can't eat it, you can't move it. In Eretz Yisrael. Outside of Eretz Yisrael, it's still edible. Why is it edible? Because you can eat and leave over at the end. So therefore, it is edible. So therefore, that is not muktzeh. So there's a big fundamental difference between Eretz Yisrael challah and Chutz La'aretz challah. But so outside of Eretz Yisrael, it's not a very big problem. I'll tell you, in Eretz Yisrael, it's a very big problem because if that's all the challah you have, that's it. You can't eat it. You're gonna have to borrow challah from somebody.
And what do you do with that challah?
No, after Shabbos you separate challah, and then you eat it. You can't separate challah on Shabbos. Even in Eretz Yisrael, you're allowed to separate challah. If you didn't do it before, you could do it after. But that's before you eat it. Once you eat it, you can't do it anymore. Now, what happens if you have, let's say, non-kosher meat? It's edible, not frozen. Non-kosher meat. You're not allowed to eat it. But because it's not forbidden to benefit from, you can give it to your animals. You can give it, you're allowed to feed it to animals. So therefore, that trade for food will not be Muktzeh on Shabbos because you're allowed to benefit from it. If it's meat and milk that you're not allowed to benefit from on Shabbos, then that's completely Muktzeh because it's not usable. A meat and milk, chametz on Pesach. The very interesting halacha in Shulchan Aruch, a lot of halachos in Shulchan Aruch. What happens in the middle of Pesach, Yom Tov? You find chametz. We got to put it away. You're not allowed to pick up that chametz on Yom Tov and put it away in the closet where the chametz is, even though you sold it. But that chametz, you're not allowed to touch in Yom Tov because it's chametz. You're not allowed to even pick it up to throw out or to put into the closet. Let's say if you sold your chametz, to put it into the closet where the chametz is sold. So what does halacha say if you find chametz on Pesach? What do? You take a vessel, a dish, and you just, or shmata, whatever, and you cover it. You can't move it because it's muktzeh. I'm talking about on Yom Tov. 2 days of Pesach. Or Shabbos Pesach. It's muktzeh. So what happens if somebody finds a bottle of vodka, scotch, whatever, bourbon, in the middle of Yom Tov Pesach, and it's Yom Tov? The only thing you're not allowed to pick it up and move it somewhere. The only thing you're allowed to do is cover it with a shmata, with a cloth, with a whatever, with a bag, whatever, anything that will cover it. But you're not allowed to pick it up and throw it out because it is muktzeh. Another interesting thing: what happens if somebody has a garment that has shatnez in it? Wool and linen. That you're not allowed to wear the garment. So even though, by the way, it is usable for other things not to wear. In other words, something that has wool and linen, you're not allowed to wear. But you could cover books with it. You're just not allowed to wear it. But the problem is a garment of shatnez, halacha says, is muktzeh on Shabbos. Why? Because that garment, let's say the suit jacket, it's not made to cover books. It's made to wear. It's not torn and ripped or whatever. It's made to wear. And you're not allowed to wear it because it's shatnez. So that garment would be completely muktzeh on Shabbos. A tablecloth, as long as you're not sitting on it. No, I'm saying if you sit on a cloth, if a chair has shatnez in it, you're not allowed to sit on the chair. It's a very big problem. In Russia, a lot of the carriages had shatnez in it. And many great chassidim like Rabbi Hillel Paducher would never go in such a carriage unless he brought his own chair. Because by sitting on it, you benefit, you're getting warmth. It's warming your body. You're wearing it. Halachically, you're wearing it. You can't lay on a blanket that has shatnez. In fact, I want to get into now. It's time for Tanya, but for those that play baseball, there was a number many years ago. Somebody woke up and they realized that in the Wilson baseball mitts, baseball gloves, there were shatnez. But they took care of it and the situation was safe. Anyway, to be continued, let's go to Tanya.